There's a particular kind of emptiness that comes from losing someone without knowing why. It's the kind that settles into your bones and makes every morning feel like you're waking up to the same unanswered question. For nearly a year, 58-year-old Joel Carter had lived with that emptiness after his wife Laura vanished without a trace. The police had no leads. The neighbors had no answers. Life just continued, hollow and quiet. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, his German shepherd Max started barking at the living room window. Frantic, desperate barking. He scratched at the glass, whined, and wouldn't calm down no matter what Joel tried. Finally, Joel followed the dog's gaze outside and walked to the back of their property. That's when he saw it. Something half buried in the dirt. Laura's silver bracelet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Joel Carter had always been a man of routines. Wake at 6:30, coffee by 7, start work by 8. For 28 years, those routines had included Laura, her humming in the kitchen, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingering in the bathroom, the way she'd kiss his cheek before heading out for her morning errands. Now, nearly a year after she'd vanished, the routines remained, but they felt like going through the motions of a life that no longer existed. He stood in the backyard, Laura's silver bracelet clutched in his palm, dirt still clinging to its delicate links. Max sat beside him, quieter now but watchful, as if understanding the weight of what he'd uncovered. The bracelet was real, solid. Laura had worn it every single day of their marriage, a gift from her grandmother, she'd always said. She never took it off. Not to shower, not to sleep, not ever. So how did it end up buried in their backyard? Joel's hands trembled as he turned the bracelet over, examining it in the fading afternoon light. The clasp was broken, as if it had been torn from her wrist. There were scratches on the silver, deep enough to catch his fingernail. His mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Millbrook Heights had always been the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, where the biggest controversy was whose Christmas decorations went up too early. Joel and Laura had moved here 30 years ago, newlyweds with dreams of raising a family in a safe, quiet town. They'd bought the house on Maple Street, a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch and a backyard, big enough for a garden and a dog. Preston had been born 2 years later. Their son, their joy, their reason for everything. Joel could still remember teaching him to ride a bike in this very yard, Laura laughing as Preston wobbled and fell and got right back up again. Those had been good years, simple years. Now Preston was 21, finishing his senior year at State University 3 hours away. He'd been a freshman when Laura disappeared, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Joel had insisted he stay in school, keep his routines, not let this derail his future. But he knew it had affected Preston deeply. His grades had slipped. He called home less. When he did visit, there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Joel walked slowly back toward the house, Max trailing at his heels. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. Everything looked the same as it had this morning, yet everything had changed. He'd spent 11 months accepting what the police had told him, that Laura had left of her own accord, that she'd walked away from their marriage, from their life, from him. But this bracelet told a different story. Inside, the house felt too big, too empty. Joel had stopped going into their bedroom weeks ago, choosing instead to sleep in the guest room down the hall. Laura's things were exactly where she'd left them. her reading glasses on the nightstand, her robe hanging on the bathroom door, her slippers tucked under the bed. He couldn't bring himself to move them. Doing so felt like admitting she was never coming back. He set the bracelet on the kitchen counter and pulled out his phone. Detective Iris Pemberton's card was still tucked in the drawer where he'd placed it 6 months ago when the active investigation had been closed. The police had done what they could, she'd explained gently. They'd searched, interviewed, followed every lead. There was no evidence of foul play. No suspicious activity on Laura's bank accounts. No signs of struggle. Her car had been found 3 counties away, parked at a rest stop, keys in the ignition. Wiped clean. The prevailing theory was that Laura had planned her departure, that she'd needed a fresh start, a new life. Maybe there was someone else. Maybe the marriage hadn't been as solid as Joel believed. These suggestions had cut deeper than any knife, but Joel had no evidence to argue against them. Until now. He dialed Pemberton's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Detective Pemberton, this is Joel Carter. I know it's been a while, but I found something. Laura's bracelet. It was buried in our backyard. She never took it off. Never. I think—" He paused, trying to steady his voice. "I think something happened to her. Something bad. Please call me back." He ended the call and stood staring at the bracelet. Max whined softly and pressed his head against Joel's leg. Joel reached down and scratched behind the dog's ears. "Good boy," he whispered. "You knew, didn't you? You always knew something was wrong." Max had been Laura's dog originally. She'd brought him home 5 years ago, a gangly puppy with enormous paws and soulful eyes. Joel had protested. They didn't need a dog, didn't have time for one, but Laura had been insistent. "Every home needs a dog," she'd said. And that was that. Max had grown into a loyal, gentle giant who followed Laura everywhere. After she disappeared, Max had been inconsolable for weeks. He'd sit by the front door for hours, waiting. He'd stopped eating. The vet said it was grief. But today, Max hadn't been grieving. He'd been alerting. Joel walked to the living room window where Max had been barking. From this angle, he could see the back corner of the property where he'd found the bracelet. Had Max seen something? Smelled something? Dogs had senses far beyond human comprehension. Maybe Max had known all along that Laura hadn't left willingly. The doorbell rang, startling Joel from his thoughts. Through the front window, he could see Gwen Paulson standing on the porch, holding a covered dish. Gwen was 74, a widow who lived 3 doors down. She'd taken it upon herself to look after Joel since Laura's disappearance, bringing meals, checking in, offering the kind of motherly concern that was both comforting and suffocating. Joel opened the door. "Evening, Gwen." "I made pot roast," she said, bustling past him into the kitchen. "You're too thin, Joel. You need to eat properly." She set the dish on the counter, then noticed the bracelet. Her expression shifted. "Is that Laura's?" Joel nodded. "Max found it, in the backyard. Buried." Gwen picked up the bracelet carefully, examining it with the same intensity Joel had. "She wore this every day." "I know." "Joel, this changes things, doesn't it?" "I hope so. I called Detective Pemberton." Gwen set the bracelet down and turned to face him fully. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, held something Joel couldn't quite read. "There's something I should tell you. I probably should have mentioned it months ago. But I didn't want to worry you without being certain." Joel's pulse quickened. "What is it?" "About 2 weeks before Laura disappeared, I saw a car, a black sedan. It was parked down the street, just sitting there. I noticed because it was there for hours and I didn't recognize it. I thought maybe someone was lost or waiting for someone. And I saw it again the next day, and the day after that. Always in the same spot, always with someone sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't see clearly enough to identify them, but they seemed to be watching your house. Joel felt a chill run through him. Why didn't you tell the police? I wasn't sure. By the time Laura disappeared, I'd convinced myself I was being a paranoid old woman. The car was gone by then, and I had no license plate, no description. What could I tell them? She reached out and squeezed his arm. But finding that bracelet, Joel, maybe I wasn't imagining things. After Gwen left, Joel couldn't settle. He paced the house, his mind churning through possibilities. Someone had been watching their house. Laura's bracelet had been buried in their yard. The broken clasp suggested it had been torn from her wrist. None of this pointed to a woman who'd willingly walked away from her life. He found himself standing in the doorway of their bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the space in silver shadows. He stepped inside for the first time in weeks and sat on Laura's side of the bed. Her pillow still held the faint scent of her shampoo. "Where are you?" he whispered into the darkness. "What happened to you?" On impulse, he opened her nightstand drawer. Inside were the usual items: hand lotion, a sleep mask, bookmarks, reading glasses. But tucked in the back, he found something he'd never noticed before: a small, leather-bound book. He pulled it out and opened it. It was a journal. Laura's handwriting filled the pages. Joel's heart hammered as he flipped through it. The entries were dated, starting about 8 months before she disappeared. He turned to a random page and began to read. I saw him again today, just standing across the street, pretending to look at his phone. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. I always do. I don't know what he wants, but I'm scared. I can't tell Joel. He'll worry, and what if I'm wrong? What if it's nothing? Joel's blood ran cold. He flipped forward, scanning entries. Kay was at the grocery store again. Same aisle, same pretend coincidence. This isn't random anymore. He's following me. I need to figure out what to do. If I go to the police, what do I tell them? That someone's been watching me? They'll think I'm paranoid. But I know I'm not. Something is very wrong. The entries continued, each one more anxious than the last. Laura had been afraid, terrified, and she'd hidden it from him, trying to protect him from her fear. Joel reached the final entry, dated 2 days before Laura disappeared. I found out why he's been watching. It's worse than I thought. I have to be careful now. I have evidence, but I need more. If I go public too soon, he'll destroy everything. I've made copies, hidden them somewhere safe. If anything happens to me, Joel will find them. He has to. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, my love. I'm sorry for all the secrets. I was just trying to keep you and Preston safe. But I don't think I can keep us safe anymore. Kay knows that I know, and I don't know what he'll do about it. That was the last entry. Joel sat motionless, the journal trembling in his hands. Laura hadn't left. She'd been taken. And someone named Kay was responsible. Joel didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, Laura's journal open before him, reading and rereading every entry. Each page revealed a wife he hadn't fully known, a woman carrying fear she'd hidden behind smiles and normalcy, protecting him from a threat he'd never seen coming. The entry that haunted him most was from 6 months before she disappeared. I've been so careful, changed my routines, never mentioned it to anyone. But today I realized, What if careful isn't enough? What if Kay already knows everything I've found? The evidence I've gathered could destroy him, but it could also destroy us. I keep thinking about Preston, about Joel, about the life we've built. Is exposing the truth worth losing everything? What truth? What had Laura discovered that made someone want to silence her? Joel flipped to the back of the journal, hoping for answers. The last few pages contained names, dates, and numbers, fragments that meant nothing to him in isolation. One name appeared repeatedly: Harold Finch. Joel recognized it. Finch Financial Services, where Laura had worked part-time as a bookkeeper for the past 3 years. It was supposed to be easy work, something to keep her busy after Preston left for college. She'd handle the books 2 days a week. Nothing stressful. But according to these entries, Laura had stumbled onto something at Finch Financial, something that had put her in danger. His phone buzzed at 6:15 in the morning. Detective Pemberton. "Mr. Carter, I got your message. You found Laura's bracelet." Joel explained everything. Max's barking, finding the bracelet buried in the yard, the broken clasp, Gwen's observation about the black sedan. Then he told her about the journal. There was a long pause on the other end. "I'm coming over. Don't touch anything else." "And Joel? If Laura was investigating something dangerous, you need to be careful too." Pemberton arrived within the hour, a compact woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. She'd been kind, but realistic during the original investigation, never offering false hope, but always treating Laura's case with respect. Joel had appreciated that, even when the case went cold. She sat at his kitchen table, latex gloves on, carefully turning the pages of Laura's journal. Her expression grew more serious with each entry. "This changes everything," she said finally. "Your wife wasn't running away. She was building a case against someone." "Harold Finch," Joel said. "She mentions him repeatedly. He owns the financial services company where she worked." Pemberton nodded slowly. "I know Finch. His firm manages retirement accounts and investments for a lot of people in this area. Well respected, on the boards of several charities." She looked up at Joel. "Which makes him either innocent or very good at hiding." "The journal mentions Kay multiple times. Someone who was following her, watching her. Any idea who Kay might be?" Joel shook his head. "None. But Gwen saw someone in a black sedan watching our house before Laura disappeared." Pemberton made notes, her pen moving quickly across her pad. "I'm going to reopen this case officially. And I need to be honest with you, Joel. If Laura uncovered financial crimes and someone wanted to silence her, we're looking at a very different investigation than we conducted before." "What does that mean?" "It means the people we're dealing with are sophisticated. Dangerous. It means Laura's car being found wiped clean wasn't about a woman starting fresh. It was about someone covering their tracks." She closed the journal carefully. "I need to take this as evidence. I'll get you a receipt." "Wait." Joel stood up. "There's more. Laura mentioned hiding evidence somewhere safe. She made copies of whatever she found. If I can locate them." "Absolutely not." Pemberton's voice was firm. "Joel, I understand you want answers, but this isn't something you can investigate yourself. These people, if they took Laura, they're not going to hesitate if they think you're getting close to whatever she discovered. So I'm supposed to just sit here and do nothing. You're supposed to let me do my job." Her tone softened. "I know this is hard, but you finding that bracelet, finding this journal, you've already done more than most people could. Now let law enforcement take it from here." After Pemberton left, Joel felt the walls closing in. She was right, of course. He wasn't an investigator. He was an accountant who worked from home and whose most exciting daily decision was whether to have coffee or tea. He had no training, no resources, no idea how to find his wife. But he couldn't do nothing. He opened his laptop and searched for Harold Finch. The man's face appeared in dozens of photos, charity galas, business conferences, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Finch was in his early 60s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, always photographed with a warm smile. He looked like someone's kindly uncle, not a criminal. Joel dug deeper, searching for any hint of scandal or controversy. Nothing. Finch Financial Services had an impeccable reputation, 5-star reviews, testimonials from satisfied clients, articles in local business magazines praising Finch's integrity and community involvement. But Laura had found something worth killing for. Joel's phone rang. Preston's name flashed on the screen. "Dad, is everything okay? You sounded weird when we talked yesterday." Joel had called Preston after finding the bracelet, but hadn't mentioned the journal. Now, sitting alone in the house, where Laura's absence pressed against him from every corner, he made a decision. Preston deserved to know the truth. "Son, I need to tell you something. Your mother didn't leave us. I don't think she left willingly at all." He explained everything: the bracelet, the journal, Laura's fear, the evidence she'd been gathering. Preston was silent for a long time. "I'm coming home," Preston finally said, his voice tight with emotion. "I'm leaving right now. You have exams. I don't care about exams, Dad. Someone took Mum. Someone hurt her. And you're there alone dealing with this. I'm coming home." Joel wanted to argue, to insist Preston stay in school, maintain normalcy. But the truth was, he didn't want to be alone. And maybe Preston needed this too, needed to feel like he was doing something, fighting for his mother instead of passively accepting her absence. "Drive carefully," Joel said. "And Preston? We're going to find out what happened to her. I promise you that." After the call ended, Joel returned to Laura's journal. He read it again, this time taking notes, trying to piece together a timeline. Laura had first noticed she was being followed 8 months before she disappeared. She'd discovered something at Finch Financial 7 months before. The entries grew more frightened, more urgent as time passed. And then, 2 days before she vanished, that final entry about having evidence hidden somewhere safe. Where would Laura hide something she wanted Joel to find? But no one else. He searched the house methodically. Her closet, her dresser drawers, the boxes in the attic. He looked behind picture frames, under mattresses, inside book covers. Hours passed. Max followed him from room to room, as if understanding the importance of this search. It was almost sunset when Joel stood in Laura's small home office, really just a converted alcove off the living room, where she kept her desk and filing cabinet. He'd already searched here once, but he did it again, pulling out every drawer, checking for false bottoms. Nothing. He sat in her chair, defeated. The office looked out over the backyard, the same view from which Max had been barking. From here, Joel could see the spot where he'd found the bracelet. The evening light cast it in shadow now. Something clicked in his mind. The bracelet had been buried, deliberately placed where it might be found, but not obviously. Laura had been careful, methodical. If she'd hidden evidence, she would have put it somewhere meaningful, somewhere Joel would eventually think to look. His eyes fell on the small bookshelf beside Laura's desk. It held her favorite novels, books she'd collected over the years. He scanned the titles, classics, mysteries, a few poetry collections, and there, on the third shelf, a book that didn't quite fit, a leather-bound photo album. Joel pulled it out. It was their wedding album, something they hadn't looked at in years. He opened it carefully, and photographs from 28 years ago greeted him. Laura young and radiant in her white dress, Joel's face beaming with happiness, both of them so impossibly young and full of hope. He turned the pages slowly, remembering that day, that feeling of starting a life together. And then, tucked between 2 pages near the back, he found it. A key. Small and brass, with a number stamped on it. 247. Joel held the key up to the light, turning it over in his fingers. The number 247 was stamped clearly on one side, but there was no other identifying information. No company name, no address, nothing to indicate what it unlocked or where. But Laura had hidden it in their wedding album for a reason. She'd wanted him to find it eventually, tucked among memories of the day they'd promised to spend their lives together. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. This key was connected to everything they'd built, everything they'd been. He took a photo of the key with his phone and began searching online for storage facilities in the area. There were dozens within a 20-mile radius. He started calling them one by one, asking if they had a unit numbered 247. Most said no. A few said they'd need him to come in person with identification before they could confirm anything. By the time Preston arrived home 3 hours later, Joel had narrowed the list to 5 possibilities. His son walked through the door looking older than he had at Thanksgiving, his face drawn with worry and determination. They embraced, holding on longer than usual. "Show me everything," Preston said. They sat together at the kitchen table, and Joel walked Preston through the journal entries, the key, his theory about storage units. Preston listened intently, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the reality that his mother had been in danger and tried to handle it alone. "Why didn't she tell us?" Preston asked, his voice breaking slightly. "We could have helped her. We could have protected her." "She was protecting us," Joel said. "She thought if we didn't know, we'd be safe. She was wrong, but I understand why she did it." Preston picked up the key. "So we find this storage unit. We find whatever evidence Mom hid. Then what?" "Then we give it to Detective Pemberton, and she builds a case." "And what if the evidence tells us where Mum is?" Joel met his son's eyes. That was the question he'd been afraid to voice, afraid to hope for. "Then we bring her home." The next morning, they started with the closest storage facility. Secure space. Storage on the east side of town. The building was a sprawling complex of orange metal units behind a chain-link fence. Joel pulled into the parking lot, Preston beside him, both of them tense with anticipation. Inside the small office, a young woman sat behind a desk, her name tag reading Corinne. She looked up with a professional smile. "How can I help you?" Joel held up the key. "I'm trying to locate a unit, number 247. My wife rented it, but I don't know which facility it's at." Corinne typed on her computer. "Let me check our system." Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Then she nodded. "Yes, we have a unit 247. It's registered to a Laura Carter. Are you Joel Carter?" Joel's heart leapt. "Yes, that's my wife. I'm Joel." "I'll need to see your ID. Our records show you're listed as an authorized user on the account." Joel fumbled for his wallet, hands shaking slightly. Laura had planned for this, had made sure he could access whatever she'd hidden. Corinne verified his identification, made copies, and handed him a receipt along with directions to the unit. "It's in Building C, 2nd floor," she said. Then her expression shifted, becoming more personal. "I remember your wife. She came in every month, always on the first Tuesday. Very punctual, very kind. She brought me coffee once when I was having a rough morning. Corinne paused. I haven't seen her in a while. Is she okay? Joel didn't know how to answer that. We're looking for her, he said finally. That's why I'm here. Understanding crossed Corinne's face, followed by concern. I hope you find what you're looking for. Joel and Preston walked through the facility, following the signs to Building C. The storage complex was quiet, most units locked tight, holding the accumulated possessions of lives in transition. They climbed the exterior stairs to the second floor and walked along the corridor until they reached Unit 247. Joel inserted the key. It turned smoothly. He lifted the rolling door, and fluorescent light from the hallway spilled into the small space. Inside were 4 cardboard boxes, neatly stacked and labeled in Laura's handwriting. Evidence, do not destroy. Beside the boxes sat a small black duffel bag. Joel and Preston stood frozen for a moment, staring at the tangible proof of Laura's secret investigation. Then Joel stepped inside and opened the first box. It was filled with documents, bank statements, transaction records, client files, all photocopied and meticulously organized. Joel picked up a folder and flipped through it. The documents showed accounts belonging to elderly clients of Finch Financial Services, people who'd trusted Harold Finch with their retirement savings. But according to Laura's notes attached to each file, something was very wrong. Withdrawals that clients hadn't authorized, transfers to accounts that didn't match client instructions, falsified signatures on authorization forms. The pattern was clear. Harold Finch was systematically stealing from his clients, small amounts at a time, spread across dozens of accounts, so no single theft would trigger immediate suspicion. This is fraud, Preston said, looking over Joel's shoulder. Major fraud. We're talking millions of dollars. Joel opened the second box and found more of the same, evidence of embezzlement spanning at least 3 years. Laura had documented everything, cross-referencing transactions, highlighting discrepancies, building an airtight case against Harold Finch. The third box contained something different. Surveillance photos. Images of Harold Finch meeting with various people in parking lots, restaurants, and offices. Laura had been following him, documenting his movements. One set of photos showed Finch with a younger man, maybe early 30s, having what looked like an intense conversation outside a coffee shop. Joel studied the younger man's face. There was something familiar about him, something that nagged at the edges of his memory. Preston pulled out his phone and took pictures of the surveillance photos. We need to document all of this before we turn it over to the police. The fourth box held financial records that appeared to be Finch's personal accounts, along with documents for shell companies and offshore accounts. Laura had somehow accessed information that went beyond what she could have seen as a part-time bookkeeper. She dug deep, uncovering the full scope of Finch's operation. Joel reached for the black duffel bag. Inside, he found a burner phone, a stack of cash, maybe $5,000, and a flash drive. There was also a sealed envelope with Joel's name on it. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Laura's familiar handwriting. My dearest Joel, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to be burdened with this, but I couldn't stay silent about what I discovered. Harold Finch is a thief and a monster. He's stolen millions from vulnerable people who trusted him with their life savings. I've gathered all the evidence anyone would need to prosecute him. But Joel, there's something else. Something more dangerous. Finch isn't working alone. He has connections to people who won't hesitate to protect their interests. I've made enemies I never intended to make. The burner phone in this bag has one number saved under safe. If you find this, call that number. Her name is Veronica Steele. She's a former FBI agent, and she's been helping me plan how to expose Finch safely. Trust her. She knows everything. I love you. I love Preston. I'm sorry I kept this from you both. I was trying to protect you. I hope I succeed in exposing these criminals. But if I don't, please finish what I started. Make sure those people get justice. All my love always, Laura. Joel read the letter twice, then handed it to Preston. His son's eyes filled with tears as he read his mother's words. She knew, Preston whispered. She knew they might come after her, and she did this anyway. Joel picked up the burner phone. It was old, the battery dead. We need to charge this. We need to call Veronica Steele. They loaded all the boxes into Joel's car, working quickly, both of them glancing around nervously. If Harold Finch had taken Laura because of this evidence, and if he knew Joel was now looking into his wife's disappearance, then they might be in danger too. As they drove away from secure space storage, Joel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He checked his rearview mirror repeatedly, looking for a black sedan, for any sign they were being followed. Dad, Preston said quietly, what do we do if Mum's letter is right? What if these people are dangerous enough that they killed her? Joel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then we make sure they pay for it, every single one of them. Back at the house, Joel and Preston worked methodically, spreading Laura's evidence across the dining room table. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Years of financial records, hundreds of pages of documentation, surveillance photos, annotated notes in Laura's precise handwriting. She'd been building a case that could destroy Harold Finch completely. While the burner phone charged on the counter, Joel photographed every document, every photo, creating a digital backup. If anything happened to the original evidence, they'd still have copies. Preston organized the files chronologically, his business major training showing as he identified patterns in the fraudulent transactions. Look at this, Preston said, pointing to a spreadsheet Laura had created. Finch targeted elderly clients specifically, people over 70, people who might not check their statements carefully, or who might not notice small withdrawals. Joel studied the list of names. He recognized several: neighbors, people from church, the elderly couple who lived 2 streets over. Harold Finch hadn't just stolen from strangers. He'd stolen from his own community, from people who'd trusted him with their life savings. The burner phone finally powered on with a weak chime. Joel picked it up, navigating the simple menu. There was only one contact saved. Safe. He pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. Who is this? Her voice was cautious, professional. My name is Joel Carter. I'm looking for Veronica Steele. A pause. How did you get this number? My wife, Laura Carter. She left me this phone. She said, if something happened to her, I should call you. Another pause. Longer this time. Is Laura? She's been missing for 11 months. But I found evidence she was building a case against Harold Finch. Your number was with that evidence. Stay where you are. Don't talk to anyone else about this. I'll be there in 2 hours. The line went dead. Joel looked at Preston. She's coming here. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing more documents. Joel called Detective Pemberton and updated her about the storage unit, the evidence, and Veronica Steele. Pemberton was quiet for a long moment. Joel, you need to be very careful. If this evidence is as damning as you say, and if Finch is connected to dangerous people, then you and Preston could be at risk. Don't let anyone know you have this material until we can get it secured properly. Veronica Steele is coming here. Laura trusted her. I'll run a background check on her. In the meantime, keep your doors locked and your phone close. At exactly 2 hours, a silver SUV pulled into Joel's driveway. A woman emerged, tall, maybe 50, with short-cropped grey hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, and her eyes scanned the street carefully before she approached the front door. Joel opened it before she could knock. Veronica Steele. Joel Carter. It wasn't a question. She stepped inside quickly, and Joel noticed she checked the street again before he closed the door. This is your son? Preston. Veronica nodded to him, then turned her full attention to Joel. Tell me everything. Start with when Laura disappeared. They sat in the living room, and Joel recounted the past year, Laura's disappearance, the police investigation that went nowhere, finding the bracelet, the journal, the storage unit. Veronica listened without interrupting, her face impassive, but her eyes sharp, processing every detail. When Joel finished, Veronica was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Laura contacted me 4 months before she disappeared. She'd uncovered the fraud at Finch Financial and knew she'd stumbled onto something dangerous. She wanted help figuring out how to expose Finch without putting herself or her family at risk. What did you tell her? I told her to go to the FBI immediately, that the evidence she had was solid and that they could protect her. But Laura wanted to gather more proof first. She was worried that if she went public too soon, Finch would destroy evidence or disappear. Veronica's expression tightened. I urged her to stop investigating, to let professionals handle it. But she was determined. She said too many people had been hurt, and she couldn't live with herself if she didn't see it through. When did you last hear from her? 2 days before she disappeared. She called from this burner phone and said she had everything she needed. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in Baxter, neutral territory, public place. She never showed up. Veronica's voice held genuine regret. I tried calling her. Nothing. I drove to your house, watched for a few days, but there was no sign of her. I considered going to you directly, but I didn't know if that would put you in more danger. When the police ruled it a voluntary disappearance, I knew something had gone very wrong. Preston leaned forward. If Finch took her, where would he keep her? Is she... He couldn't finish the question. Veronica's expression softened slightly. I don't know, but I can tell you this. If Finch wanted permanent silence, Laura's body would have been found. The fact that she simply vanished suggests something else. Like what? Joel asked. Like maybe she's being held somewhere, either as leverage or because Finch needs something from her. Information about where she stored evidence, who else she might have told. Veronica stood and walked to the dining room, examining the documents spread across the table. This is extensive. Laura did excellent work, but if Finch knows this evidence exists, he'll be desperate to destroy it. Then we need to move quickly, Joel said. We need to use this to find Laura before he decides she's no longer useful, Veronica finished. Yes. She pulled out her phone and made a call. It's Steele. I need you to run everything you can find on Harold Finch. Properties, vehicles, known associates, financial records. Everything. She listened for a moment. I'll send you the details. I need this fast. She ended the call and looked at Joel. I still have contacts from my FBI days. People who owe me favors. We're going to find out everything about Harold Finch, where he goes, who he works with, any property he owns that might be suitable for holding someone. There's something else, Joel said. He pulled up the surveillance photos on his laptop, showing Veronica the images of Finch with the younger man. Laura was tracking Finch. This man appears in several photos. Do you recognize him? Veronica studied the image carefully. Then her expression changed. "That's Kyle Brennan. He's Finch's nephew. Works as what Finch calls a business consultant. But from what I learned when Laura first contacted me, Kyle handles the dirty work. If Finch needed someone to follow Laura, to intimidate her, Kyle would be the one to do it." Joel felt his blood run cold. Kyle Brennan. The name clicked into place. "He lives in this neighborhood, 3 houses down." Veronica's head snapped up. "What? Kyle Brennan. He moved in about 2 years ago. Nice guy, friendly, always waves hello. He brought us a casserole after Laura disappeared." Joel's voice shook with anger and realization. "He's been here the whole time, watching us, making sure we didn't know anything." Preston stood abruptly. "That son of a—" "Sit down," Veronica said sharply. "Both of you, listen to me. If Kyle Brennan has been watching you, then approaching him directly would be suicide. These people have already made Laura disappear. They won't hesitate to do the same to you." "So what do we do?" Joel demanded. "We're smart about this. We gather information, we build our case, and we find out where they're keeping Laura, if she's still alive. Then we bring in law enforcement with everything we need to take them down." Veronica's eyes were hard. "But Joel, you need to understand something. The people we're dealing with have already committed serious crimes. They're cornered, which makes them dangerous. If they suspect you know the truth, they'll act." Joel thought about Kyle Brennan, living 3 houses away, watching, waiting, reporting back to Harold Finch. How many times had Kyle seen Joel leave for work, seen Preston come home for holidays, observed their grief and their routines? "He knows I found the bracelet," Joel said quietly. "Gwen Paulson saw me in the backyard. She probably mentioned it to neighbors. Kyle would have heard." "Then we're on a clock," Veronica said. "Once Finch knows you're investigating, he'll either move Laura or—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Max suddenly growled from his position by the window. Joel turned to see a familiar figure walking past on the sidewalk. Kyle Brennan, hands in his pockets, moving at a casual pace. But his head turned toward Joel's house, his eyes scanning the windows. The 3 of them stepped back from view, hearts pounding. "He's checking on you," Veronica whispered, "seeing if anything's changed." They watched as Kyle continued down the street and disappeared around the corner. Joel's hands clenched into fists. That man knew where Laura was. That man had probably been there when she was taken, had probably helped make her disappear, and he'd been living 3 houses away the entire time, playing the role of concerned neighbor, while Joel's world fell apart. Veronica stayed at the house, setting up what she called a command center in Joel's home office. She had laptops, phones, and equipment Joel didn't recognize, all designed to gather information without alerting their targets. Preston helped her organize Laura's evidence digitally, while Joel made coffee and tried to keep his hands from shaking. The reality of their situation was sinking in. His wife had been taken by criminals who lived in his own neighborhood. For 11 months, he'd grieved while the man responsible walked past his house, smiled, waved hello. Detective Pemberton called back an hour later. Veronica Steele checks out. Former FBI, specialized in financial crimes and organized criminal networks. Retired 5 years ago and works as a private investigator now. Excellent reputation. If Laura trusted her, you can too. "Thank you," Joel said. "Joel, I'm bringing this to my captain. With the evidence you've found, we can start building a case against Finch. But I need you to be patient. These things take time. Time is something we might not have. I understand. But rushing this could get people hurt, including you and Preston." She paused. promise me you won't do anything reckless." Joel couldn't make that promise. Not when Laura might be alive somewhere, waiting for rescue. "I'll be careful." After the call ended, he found Veronica reviewing the surveillance photos on her laptop, cross-referencing them with property records. "Finch owns more than just his office building," she said. "He's got residential rental properties, commercial spaces, and—" She clicked through several screens. "A farmhouse, 40 miles outside town. Purchased 3 years ago through a shell company called Sentinel Holdings." "A farmhouse?" Preston asked, looking over her shoulder. "Remote location, purchased under a corporate name that's difficult to trace back to Finch. According to utility records." She pulled up another screen. "The property uses electricity and water, despite supposedly being vacant." Joel felt hope surge through him. "You think Laura might be there?" "It's possible. A remote location would be ideal for holding someone. Private, isolated, no neighbors to hear anything unusual." Veronica zoomed in on a satellite image of the property. Small farmhouse, detached barn, surrounded by woods. Nearest neighbor is over a mile away. "We need to check it out," Joel said immediately. "We need to be smart about it," Veronica countered. "If Laura is there and we go charging in, we could get her killed, or ourselves killed. We need reconnaissance first, confirmation before we act." Preston pulled out his phone. "I can look up the property records, see what else we can find out about it." While Preston researched, Veronica made more calls. Joel paced the living room, unable to sit still. Every minute they waited felt like an eternity. If Laura was in that farmhouse, if she'd been held there for 11 months, he couldn't let himself think too deeply about what that meant, what she'd endured. Gwen Paulson appeared at the front door with another covered dish. Joel opened it reluctantly, not wanting to seem suspicious by turning away her kindness. "I made chicken soup," Gwen said, then noticed Veronica in the background. "Oh, you have company. I don't mean to intrude." "Not at all. This is Veronica, an old friend of Laura's." Gwen's expression brightened. "How wonderful. Any friend of Laura's is welcome here." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Have you heard anything more from the police? About the bracelet?" "They're looking into it," Joel said carefully. "Good, that's good." Gwen glanced past him toward Preston and Veronica. "You know, I've been thinking about that black sedan I saw." I remembered something else. "The driver got out once, walked up the street toward your house. I only saw him from a distance, but he was young, maybe 30s. Athletic build." Joel's pulse quickened. "Would you recognize him if you saw him again?" "Possibly." "Why?" Joel pulled up one of Laura's surveillance photos on his phone, the image of Kyle Brennan. "Is this him?" Gwen squinted at the screen, then her eyes widened. "Yes, that's him, I'm certain." "Who is he?" "Someone we're very interested in. Gwen, if you see him around the neighborhood, will you call me immediately? Don't approach him, just let me know." "Of course." She handed him the soup, concern etched on her face. "Joel, be careful. Whatever you're involved in, it sounds dangerous." After Gwen left, Joel showed Veronica and Preston the photo confirmation. "That was Kyle in the black sedan. He was surveilling our house before Laura disappeared." "Which confirms he was involved in her abduction," Veronica said. "The question is, does he visit the farmhouse? If we can track his movements, we can figure out if that's where they're holding her." Preston looked up from his laptop. "I found something. The farmhouse property has a security system registered to Sentinel Holdings. It was installed 2 years ago, around the time Finch bought the property." "A security system for a vacant farmhouse?" Joel said. "That doesn't make sense unless you're protecting something valuable. Or someone," Veronica added. She pulled up Kyle Brennan's social media profiles, scrolling through posts and photos. Most were innocuous. Gym check-ins, photos with friends, sports events. But Veronica paused on a photo from 6 months ago, showing Kyle standing in front of a rural landscape, trees in the background. She compared it to the satellite image of the farmhouse property. Look at the tree line, the spacing of those pines. This photo was taken at or near the farmhouse property. Joel stared at the image. Kyle had been there 6 months ago, when Laura had already been missing for 5 months. Had she been in that house when he took this photo? "We need to go there," Joel said again, more forcefully. "Tonight. Now. If there's even a chance Laura is in that farmhouse." "I agree," Veronica said, surprising him. "But we do this right. We surveil first, confirm someone is being held there, then we call in law enforcement. We don't go in alone, and we don't take unnecessary risks." "I'm coming too," Preston said firmly. "Preston," Joel started. "She's my mother. I'm coming." Veronica looked between them. "Fine, but you both follow my lead. I've done this kind of operation before. You haven't. One wrong move and we could get Laura killed, or ourselves." "Understood?" They both nodded. "We leave at dusk," Veronica said. "That gives us a few hours to prepare. Joel, do you have binoculars? Dark clothing? A first aid kit?" "I have binoculars. The rest we can get." "Good. Preston, I need you to map out the roads around the farmhouse. We need to know every entrance and exit, plan our approach and our escape route." As Preston worked on the maps and Veronica checked her equipment, Joel went upstairs to change. He caught his reflection in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized himself. 11 months ago, he'd been a man with a simple, predictable life. Now he was preparing for a nighttime surveillance mission that could end in violence. But if it meant finding Laura, if it meant bringing her home, he'd do whatever was necessary. In the closet, he found one of Laura's sweaters still hanging where she'd left it. He touched the soft fabric, remembering her wearing it on cool autumn evenings, remembered the way she'd curl up beside him on the couch while they watched television. "I'm coming for you," he whispered. "Hold on just a little longer." Max appeared in the doorway, tail wagging slowly. The dog had sensed something was happening, that the humans in his pack were preparing for something important. Joel knelt and scratched behind Max's ears. "You saved her once," Joel told the dog, "by finding that bracelet, by refusing to let me ignore the truth. Now we're going to finish what you started." Downstairs, Veronica called out, "Joel, we need to go over the plan." Joel took a deep breath, touched Laura's sweater one more time, and headed downstairs. The next few hours would determine everything, whether they'd finally get answers, whether Laura would come home, whether this nightmare would end, or whether it would get much, much worse. They left as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and purple. Veronica drove, her SUV equipped with tinted windows and what she called essential surveillance gear. Joel sat in the passenger seat, Preston in the back, all of them dressed in dark clothing. The tension in the vehicle was palpable. "Remember the rules," Veronica said, as they left Millbrook Heights behind. "We observe only. We don't approach the property unless we have clear confirmation that Laura is inside and that she's in immediate danger. Even then, we call Detective Pemberton first. We're gathering evidence, not mounting a rescue operation." "What if we see her?" Preston asked. "What if she's right there and we can get to her?" "Then we assess the situation carefully. How many people are guarding her? What weapons might they have? What's our exit strategy? You don't save someone by getting yourself killed in the process. The drive took 45 minutes, civilization gradually giving way to rural farmland and dense woods. Veronica turned off the main highway onto a series of smaller roads, eventually killing the headlights as they approached the area where the farmhouse was located. She pulled off onto a dirt track, partially hidden by overgrown brush. We walk from here. It's about a quarter-mile through the woods to a vantage point where we can observe the property. They gathered their equipment, binoculars, a camera with a telephoto lens, flashlights with red filters to preserve night vision. Veronica also had something she called a night vision monocular and what looked like a professional listening device. "Stay close and stay quiet," she instructed. "Watch where you step. Broken branches make noise." They moved through the woods single file, Veronica leading. Joel had never done anything like this before, stalking through darkening woods toward a potential crime scene. His heart hammered in his chest, but his purpose was clear. Laura might be less than half a mile away. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, Veronica held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Through the trees ahead, Joel could see lights. The farmhouse. They crept forward to the edge of the tree line. Veronica found a position behind a fallen log that provided cover and a clear view of the property. The three of them settled in, and Veronica handed Joel the binoculars. The farmhouse was small, probably built in the 1950s, with weathered white siding and a sagging front porch. A detached barn stood about 50 yards from the house. A single vehicle was parked in the driveway, a black sedan. Joel's breath caught. "That's the car Gwen described." Through the binoculars, he could see lights on in 2 windows, one on the ground floor, one upstairs. The curtains were drawn, making it impossible to see inside. He scanned the property for any sign of Laura, any indication someone was being held there. Nothing. "Give me the binoculars," Veronica said quietly. She studied the house for several minutes, then focused on the barn. "There's a security camera on the barn, pointing toward the house, and another one on the front porch. Whoever owns this property doesn't want uninvited visitors." Preston took photos with the telephoto lens, documenting the property, the vehicle, the security setup. They waited as darkness deepened. An hour passed. The lights in the upstairs window went out. Joel's legs cramped from sitting still, but he didn't move. Veronica remained completely motionless, watching the house with the patience of someone trained for this kind of work. Then the front door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch, illuminated by the porch light. Even from this distance, Joel recognized him. Kyle Brennan. Kyle walked to the sedan, opened the trunk, and pulled out 2 grocery bags. He carried them back into the house, the door closing behind him. "Grocery bags," Preston whispered. "Why would he bring groceries to an empty house?" "He's feeding someone," Joel said, his voice tight with emotion. "She's in there. Laura is in that house." Veronica raised the night vision monocular, studying the building. "There's a basement window on the far side. It's partially below ground level. See it?" Joel looked where she indicated. Through the binoculars, he could just make out a small window near the foundation of the house, the kind that would let minimal light into a basement. "Basements are ideal for holding someone," Veronica said. "Underground, soundproof, easy to secure with a single locked door." Joel's hands trembled on the binoculars. Laura could be in that basement right now, 20 feet below where Kyle Brennan was walking around. She'd been there for 11 months, imprisoned in the dark, while Joel had gone through the motions of life, believing she'd left him. "We need to call Detective Pemberton," Veronica said, pulling out her phone. "We have enough for a warrant. Suspicious activity, confirmed presence of a person of interest, circumstantial evidence suggesting illegal detention." "Wait," Preston said. "Look." Kyle had emerged from the house again, this time carrying a white plastic bag to a garbage can beside the barn. He disposed of it and stood for a moment, looking out at the dark woods. For a terrible second, Joel thought Kyle was looking directly at them, but the man's gaze passed over their position without pausing. Kyle pulled out a phone and made a call. Even at this distance, they could hear his voice, though not the words. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then Kyle went back inside. "He's reporting to someone," Veronica said. "Probably Finch, updating him on the situation." She dialed Detective Pemberton. "It's Veronica Steele. We're at the farmhouse property 40 miles west of Millbrook Heights. We have visual confirmation of Kyle Brennan on site. Suspicious activity consistent with someone being held here. We need a warrant and a tactical team." Joel could hear Pemberton's voice through the phone. Rapid questions. Veronica provided the exact address, described what they'd observed, and explained the urgency of the situation. "How long until you can get here?" Veronica asked. A pause. "Understood. We'll maintain surveillance and call immediately if anything changes." She ended the call and turned to Joel. 2 hours minimum. She needs to get a judge to sign off on a warrant, assemble a team. These things take time. 2 hours, Joel repeated. Laura had been waiting for 11 months. What was 2 more hours? But something felt wrong. Kyle's phone call, the way he'd looked out at the woods. What if Finch knew Joel was investigating? What if Kyle had been sent here to move Laura, to eliminate evidence? As if reading his thoughts, Veronica said, "We wait. We don't do anything rash. The cavalry is coming." They settled back into their observation position. The lights in the downstairs windows remained on. Through the binoculars, Joel could occasionally see Kyle's silhouette moving past the curtains. The man seemed to be pacing, agitated. Another 30 minutes passed. Then the downstairs lights went out. The house fell dark, except for a single dim light that might have been a lamp left on somewhere inside. "He's settling in for the night," Veronica observed, "probably sleeping on a couch or in a chair. If Laura is in the basement, he'd want to stay close to make sure she doesn't escape." Joel thought about Laura in a basement room, hearing Kyle's footsteps above her, knowing her captor was just upstairs. What did she think about during those long hours? Did she still have hope that someone would find her? Did she know Joel was looking? Preston checked his watch. Another hour and a half until the police arrive. "This is the hardest part," Veronica said quietly. "The waiting. But patience saves lives. We've done this right, gathered evidence, confirmed the location, called in professionals. Now we let them do their job." But Joel couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very wrong. The farmhouse sat in darkness, holding its secrets. Inside, his wife waited, unaware that rescue was finally coming. And somewhere else, Harold Finch was likely planning his next move, calculating how to protect himself from the evidence Laura had gathered. The night deepened around them. In the distance, an owl hooted. The wind rustled through the trees, and in that dark farmhouse, the truth waited to be revealed. Joel gripped the binoculars tighter, his eyes never leaving the building. Just a little longer, he thought. Just hold on a little longer, Laura. The waiting was agony. Joel checked his watch every few minutes, watched the seconds crawl past. Beside him, Preston shifted position, trying to relieve cramped muscles. Only Veronica remained perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the farmhouse, alert for any change. An hour into their vigil, Joel's phone buzzed. He quickly silenced it, but not before seeing Detective Pemberton's name on the screen. He carefully moved back from their observation point before answering. "We have a problem," Pemberton said without preamble. "Harold Finch is gone. His office is closed, his house is empty, and his vehicle isn't at either location. We sent a patrol car by to check, and neighbors say they haven't seen him since this morning. Joel's stomach dropped. He's running. Or he's tying up loose ends. Joel, if Finch thinks you found Laura's evidence, he might— She didn't finish, but Joel understood. Finch might decide Laura was a liability he could no longer afford to keep alive. "How long until you get here?" Joel demanded. 45 minutes. We're coming as fast as we can. Do not approach that house. Do you understand me? If Finch is on his way there, the situation could turn violent. Joel ended the call and returned to Veronica and Preston. He relayed Pemberton's message, watching both their faces tighten with concern. "We need to get Laura out of there," Preston said. "Now, before Finch arrives." "We don't know for certain she's in there," Veronica cautioned, but her voice lacked conviction. "And if we go in blind, we could make things worse." "Or we could save her life," Joel countered. They fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Wait for the police and risk Finch arriving first, or act now and potentially put everyone in danger? The decision was made for them when another vehicle's headlights appeared on the access road, approaching the farmhouse. They all ducked lower, watching as a silver luxury sedan pulled into the driveway and stopped behind Kyle's black car. Through the binoculars, Joel watched Harold Finch emerge from the vehicle. Even in the dim light, Finch's body language radiated tension. He strode quickly to the front door and entered without knocking. "That's Finch," Joel whispered. "That's him." Inside the house, lights blazed on. Through the windows they could see two silhouettes, Finch and Kyle, their postures suggesting a heated conversation. Finch gestured emphatically, and Kyle appeared to be responding defensively. "They're arguing," Veronica observed, using the night vision monocular. "This isn't a routine visit. Something's wrong." Joel's phone vibrated again. A text from Pemberton. "Finch withdrew $500K in cash this afternoon. He's running. ETA 30 minutes. Do not engage." "He's here to clean up," Joel said, showing them the text. "He's going to kill Laura and disappear." Preston was already moving. "We can't wait." "Preston, stop!" Veronica reached for him, but Preston was already heading toward the farmhouse, staying low, using the darkness for cover. "Damn it!" Veronica hissed. She looked at Joel. "Stay here. Call Pemberton and tell her shots may be fired. I'm going to get your son before he gets himself killed." She moved after Preston, with practiced silence. Joel grabbed his phone, but something stopped him from making the call. Both his son and Veronica were heading toward danger. And somewhere in that house, Laura was waiting, unaware that her husband was finally here. He couldn't stay in the woods while his family walked into harm's way. Joel followed, moving as quietly as he could, using the shadows and his knowledge of the property layout from their surveillance. Preston had reached the side of the barn, Veronica close behind him. Joel caught up to them, and Veronica shot him a look that promised a lecture later. If they survived this, from their new position, they could hear raised voices from inside the house. Finch was shouting, though the words were muffled by the walls. "We need to know if Laura is in the basement," Veronica whispered. "Preston, circle around to that basement window. See if you can see anything. Don't break it, don't make noise. Just look." Preston nodded and moved along the side of the house, staying below the windows. Joel and Veronica watched him navigate the darkness until he reached the small basement window. Preston crouched beside it, cupping his hands against the glass to peer inside. Then he turned back toward them, and even in the dim light, Joel could see his son's expression. Preston nodded vigorously. He'd seen something. Someone. Laura was in there. Joel's vision tunneled, 11 months of grief, of questions, of hollow existence. It all crystallized into this single moment. His wife was alive. She was 20 feet away, and the men who'd taken her were upstairs planning to kill her. The front door of the farmhouse burst open. Kyle stormed out, Finch following close behind, still shouting, "I don't care what you think. She knows too much. And her husband is already digging. We end this tonight, and then we disappear. Do you understand?" "And the husband?" Kyle asked, his voice carrying across the yard. "If he's already found the storage unit." "Then we deal with him too," Finch snapped. "After we handle her, get the gasoline from the barn. We burn this place with her in it, and then we're gone." Joel's blood turned to ice. They were going to burn the farmhouse down with Laura inside. Kyle started walking toward the barn, toward where Joel, Veronica, and Preston were hidden. They pressed back against the wall, barely breathing. Kyle was 10 feet away, then 5. Veronica moved with sudden, decisive action. As Kyle reached the barn door, she stepped out behind him and struck the back of his head with something metal, a tactical flashlight. Kyle crumpled without a sound. Finch, who'd been walking back toward the house, spun around. "Kyle!" In the darkness, he couldn't see clearly. Veronica dragged Kyle's unconscious form into the shadows of the barn. Joel's heart hammered so loudly he was certain Finch could hear it. "Kyle!" Finch called again, his voice sharp with alarm. He pulled out a phone, and the screen's glow illuminated his face as he dialed. Preston appeared from around the house behind Finch, moving quickly. Before Finch could react, Preston tackled him. The phone went flying, and both men hit the ground hard. "Dad!" Preston shouted. "Get Mum out! I've got him!" Finch was older, but fought with desperate strength, grappling with Preston. Joel hesitated for only a moment. His son needed help, but his wife needed rescue. Veronica was already running toward the struggling pair. Joel made his choice. He ran for the house. The front door stood open. Joel burst through into a small, shabby living room. A couch, a television, empty food containers scattered across a coffee table. To his left, a narrow doorway. To his right, a kitchen. Straight ahead, a hallway. He found the basement door in the hallway, heavy with a new lock and deadbolt. The key wasn't in sight. Joel rattled the handle, panic rising. "Laura!" he shouted. "Laura, are you down there?" From below, faint but unmistakable, he heard a voice. "Joel," his wife's voice. After 11 months of silence, after 11 months of grief, Laura's voice calling his name. "I'm here!" Joel shouted back. "I'm getting you out!" The door was solid, the lock professional. Joel ran back to the kitchen, searching for something to break it with. He found a heavy cast-iron skillet and returned to the door, swinging it at the lock mechanism with all his strength. Outside, he could hear shouting, sounds of struggle. Inside, he heard Laura calling his name, her voice stronger now, filled with desperate hope. The lock mechanism bent under repeated blows but didn't break. Joel's shoulders screamed with effort, sweat pouring down his face. He swung again and again, fury and fear driving each impact. Finally, with a metallic shriek, the lock gave way. Joel wrenched the door open and saw stairs descending into darkness. He found a light switch and flipped it. At the bottom of the stairs, behind a makeshift door with a sliding bolt, was Laura. Joel's hands shook as he slid the bolt open and pulled the door wide. The basement room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, with bare concrete walls and a single cot pushed against one side, a bucket in the corner, a few books stacked on the floor. And there, rising unsteadily from the cot, was Laura. She was thinner than he remembered, her hair longer and unkempt, her face pale from months without sunlight. She wore clothes he didn't recognize, faded and worn. But her eyes, those eyes he'd loved for 28 years, were the same, now filled with tears and disbelief. "Joel," she whispered, and then she was in his arms. He held her tightly, feeling her shake with sobs against his chest. She was real, solid, alive. 11 months of wondering, of grief, of hollow existence. And here she was, holding him back with what little strength she had left. "I knew you'd come," Laura said, her voice hoarse. "I knew you'd figure it out. I left you clues. The bracelet. Did you find the bracelet?" "Max found it. He wouldn't stop barking until I followed him outside." Joel pulled back to look at her face, to confirm this wasn't a dream. "We need to go. Now. Finch is here, and he's going to kill me," Laura finished. "I know. I heard them talking. Joel, there's so much I need to tell you. Later. Right now, we run." He helped her up the stairs, supporting most of her weight. Her legs were weak from months of limited movement. They emerged into the hallway just as a gunshot cracked through the night air outside. Joel's heart seized. "Preston!" He guided Laura quickly toward the front door, emerging onto the porch to chaos. In the driveway, Veronica had Finch pinned against his sedan, one arm twisted behind his back. But Preston was on the ground, and Kyle Brennan, apparently not as unconscious as they'd thought, stood over him with a pistol. "Nobody moves!" Kyle shouted, his voice shaking. Blood ran down the side of his head from where Veronica had struck him. "I swear I'll shoot him." Veronica froze. Finch took advantage of her distraction to wrench free, stumbling away from her. He saw Laura standing on the porch and his expression twisted with rage. "You should have stayed hidden," Finch snarled. "You should have died quietly." "You're finished, Harold," Laura said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her weakened state. "Everything I found, every document, every transaction, it's all been turned over to the FBI. Even if you kill us all, you're done." "Then I have nothing to lose, do I?" Finch pulled a gun from his jacket pocket, aiming it at Laura. Joel stepped in front of his wife without thinking. "You want her? You go through me first." "Dad, don't—" Preston tried to move, but Kyle pressed the gun harder against his head. "Everyone stay calm," Veronica said, her hands raised, her voice professional despite the tension. "Harold, Kyle, you're both making this worse. The police are minutes away. If anyone fires a shot, if anyone gets hurt, you both go down for murder. Right now, you might get plea deals, reduced sentences. But murder? That's life in prison." Kyle's hand trembled on the gun. "Uncle Harold, what do we do?" Finch's eyes darted between Laura, Joel, Preston, and Veronica. Joel could see the calculation happening, the desperate weighing of options. Finch had been cornered, and cornered men did desperate things. "The evidence doesn't matter if there's no one alive to testify," Finch said slowly. "We kill them all, burn the farmhouse, disappear. By the time anyone finds the bodies, we'll be out of the country." "With what money?" Laura asked. "I found your offshore accounts too, Harold. I documented everything. The FBI froze them this afternoon. You're broke and trapped." Finch's face went white. "You're lying. Call your bank. Check your accounts. You'll see I'm telling the truth." For a moment, no one moved. Then, in the distance, sirens began to wail. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast. "The police," Veronica said. "It's over, Harold. Let it end here. No one else has to die." Kyle's resolve cracked first. "I didn't sign up for murder. I didn't—" He lowered the gun slightly, and that was all the opening Preston needed. Preston rolled sideways, away from Kyle, as Kyle's attention wavered. Veronica moved instantly, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. She struck Kyle's wrist, and the gun went flying. Kyle tried to fight back, but Veronica was trained, experienced. Within seconds, she had him face down on the ground, her knee in his back. That left Finch, still holding his gun, still aiming at Joel and Laura. The sirens grew louder, blue and red lights beginning to flash through the trees lining the access road. "It's over," Joel said quietly. "You can't win this." Finch's hand shook. For a long moment, Joel thought the man might actually pull the trigger, might try to take them down with him in a final act of spite. But then Finch's shoulders sagged, the gun lowered. "I built everything from nothing," Finch said, his voice hollow. "Worked my entire life, and she—" He glared at Laura. "She destroyed it all because she couldn't mind her own business." "You destroyed people's lives," Laura shot back. "Elderly people who trusted you with their savings. People who worked their whole lives and had nothing left because you stole from them. I stopped you from hurting anyone else." Police vehicles poured into the driveway, officers emerging with weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon! Hands where we can see them!" Finch dropped the gun and raised his hands. Officers swarmed him and Kyle, handcuffing both men. Detective Pemberton emerged from one of the vehicles, taking in the scene with wide eyes. "You couldn't wait 30 minutes?" she asked. But there was relief in her voice. "They were going to burn the house down," Joel explained, "with Laura inside. We didn't have 30 minutes. Pemberton's expression hardened. She walked over to where officers held Finch in custody. "Harold Finch, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and about 15 other charges I'm going to enjoy listing. Kyle Brennan, same charges, plus assault with a deadly weapon." Paramedics arrived, rushing to check on Laura and Preston. Laura insisted she was fine, just weak, just needed food and water and sunlight. But they loaded her into an ambulance anyway, and Joel climbed in beside her, refusing to let her out of his sight. Preston rode with them, holding his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Mum, we all thought. I know, baby," Laura said softly, reaching up to touch Preston's face. "I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm so sorry I put you both through this nightmare." "You didn't put us through anything," Joel said firmly. "Finch did this. You were trying to help people, trying to do the right thing. None of this is your fault." As the ambulance pulled away from the farmhouse, Joel looked back through the rear windows. Police were securing the scene. Evidence technicians were arriving. And in the driveway, Harold Finch sat in the back of a patrol car. His empire of lies finally collapsed. Laura squeezed Joel's hand. "I kept a journal in the basement, scraps of paper hidden in the mattress. Everything that happened, everything they said. It's all documented." "We'll get it," Joel assured her. "Every piece of evidence. We'll make sure they never hurt anyone again." The ambulance reached the main road, and Joel finally allowed himself to breathe. Laura was alive. Preston was safe. After 11 months of darkness, his family was together again. But he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Laura would need time to heal, both physically and emotionally. There would be trials, testimonies, media attention. The revelation of Laura's past identity, her years in witness protection, that would bring its own complications. None of that mattered right now. Right now, his wife was holding his hand, his son was beside them, and they were going home. The hospital kept Laura for 3 days. Malnutrition, dehydration, vitamin deficiencies, muscle atrophy from months of limited movement. The doctors catalogued the physical toll of her captivity with clinical precision. But it was the psychological impact that concerned them most. 11 months alone in a basement room, never knowing if she'd see daylight again, hearing her captors discuss whether to kill her. Trauma like that didn't heal quickly. Joel never left her side. He slept in the chair beside her bed, held her hand through the nightmares that woke her in the dark hours, and promised her over and over that she was safe now. Preston camped out in the waiting room, refusing to go home even when Joel insisted he needed rest. Detective Pemberton visited on the second day, bringing with her an FBI agent named Warren Castellano. They needed Laura's statement, her testimony about the kidnapping, and her months in captivity. Laura was strong through most of it, recounting the day Kyle Brennan had forced her off the road, how they'd drugged her and brought her to the farmhouse, how Finch had visited monthly to remind her that her evidence meant nothing if she was dead. But when she described the isolation, the endless dark hours, the fear that Joel would never find her clues, her voice broke. Joel squeezed her hand, and Pemberton gave them a moment before continuing. "The journal you kept in the basement," Castellano said gently. "We recovered it. 47 pages written on scraps of paper, every detail documented. It's powerful evidence, Mrs. Carter. Combined with the financial documents you gathered, we have enough to ensure Finch and Kyle Brennan spend the rest of their lives in prison." "What about the victims?" Laura asked. "The people Finch stole from? We're working with the courts to recover as much as possible. Finch's assets are being seized, his properties sold. It won't make everyone whole, but it's a start." Castellano leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, there's something else we need to discuss. Your original identity, Catherine Whitmore, the witness protection arrangement." Laura's face paled. "Does Joel know?" "I told him," Castellano said. "I hope that's all right. Given everything that's happened, he deserved the full truth." Laura looked at Joel, fear and shame in her eyes. "I should have told you. From the beginning. But I wanted so badly to be someone new, someone without that past. I wanted to give you and Preston a normal life." "You gave us a wonderful life," Joel said firmly. "The name doesn't matter. You're Laura. You've always been Laura to me." She started crying then, not the silent tears she'd shed before, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to release years of held-back fear and guilt. Joel held her until the storm passed, until she could breathe normally again. "There's good news," Castellano added. "The man Harold Finch's brother worked for, the one from the original Philadelphia case. He died in prison 6 years ago. The organization he ran has been dismantled. Your testimony all those years ago helped accomplish that. You don't need witness protection anymore. You can be Laura Carter or Catherine Whitmore, whichever you choose. You're free." Laura absorbed this information slowly. "Free," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I haven't been truly free in 25 years, always looking over my shoulder, always afraid the past would catch up." "It did catch up," Joel said, "but we survived it. Together." On the third day, Laura was discharged. The media had gotten wind of the story. Single father's year-long search, dog's instinct leading to wife's rescue, massive financial fraud exposed, and reporters crowded the hospital entrance. Detective Pemberton arranged for them to leave through a service exit, avoiding the chaos. Gwen Paulson was waiting at the house when they arrived, having cleaned the entire place and stocked the refrigerator. Max nearly knocked Laura over in his excitement, whining and licking her face, while she laughed and cried at the same time. "Good boy," Laura whispered, burying her face in his fur. "You saved me, didn't you? You knew I needed help." The first night home was hard. Laura couldn't sleep in their bedroom. Too many memories of the life before, and the room felt too enclosed after months in the basement. Instead, they made a bed for her on the couch in the living room, windows open, fresh air flowing through. Joel slept on the floor beside her, and Max curled up at her feet. She woke 3 times from nightmares, disoriented and panicking. Each time, Joel was there to hold her, to remind her where she was, to promise her she was safe. By morning, they were both exhausted, but together. Detective Pemberton called that afternoon. Harold Finch is cooperating. He's giving us names, account numbers, the full scope of his operation. Kyle Brennan has accepted a plea deal, 25 years in exchange for his testimony against Finch. But Joel, there's something else you should know. We found evidence that Finch was planning to go after you and Preston next. If you hadn't found Laura when you did— But we did find her, Joel interrupted. He didn't want to think about the alternative, about how close they'd all come to disaster. The trial will probably be next spring. Laura will need to testify. It's going to bring everything into the public eye. Her witness protection history, the kidnapping, all of it. We'll handle it, Joel said, looking at Laura across the room where she sat with Preston, the two of them looking through old photo albums. We've survived worse. Over the following days, they settled into a new routine. Laura worked with a therapist specializing in trauma. Preston took the semester off from college to be with his family. Joel reduced his work hours, focusing instead on helping his wife heal. They talked about everything: Laura's past as Kate Whitmore, her years in witness protection, how she'd built a new identity and a new life. She explained how she'd met Joel at a community college class, how she'd fallen in love with him, slowly, carefully, always terrified he'd discover the truth and feel betrayed. "I should have told you before we married," Laura said one evening as they sat on the back porch, the same porch where this journey had begun with Max's frantic barking. "You deserve to know who I really was." "You told me who you really were every day," Joel countered. "Through your actions, your choices, the way you loved our family. The rest is just background. You're too forgiving. I'm exactly as forgiving as I need to be to keep my family together." Laura leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their backyard. In the distance, they could see the spot where Max had led Joel to the buried bracelet, where everything had changed. "I put that bracelet there on purpose," Laura said quietly. "The day they took me. Kyle was distracted for just a moment, and I ripped it off my wrist, threw it as far as I could. I hoped someone would find it, would realize I hadn't left willingly. I never imagined it would take 11 months. But it worked. Max found it. And we found you." "I kept thinking about you," Laura continued. "In that basement, in the dark, I'd close my eyes and remember our life, our wedding day, Preston's birth, every Christmas, every vacation, every ordinary Tuesday evening, sitting on this porch. Those memories kept me alive, Joel, kept me fighting." Preston joined them on the porch, carrying 3 mugs of hot chocolate. "Mum's recipe," he said, handing them out. "I found her notes in the kitchen drawer." They sat together, the 3 of them, with Max at their feet. A family reunited, scarred but healing. "I was thinking," Preston said carefully, "maybe I should transfer to State College closer to home, at least for next semester. I don't want to be 3 hours away right now." "You don't have to do that," Laura started. "I want to," Preston insisted. "I missed 11 months with you, Mum. I'm not missing any more time." Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Then we'd love to have you home." 3 weeks after Laura's rescue, life had begun to find a new rhythm. Not the old rhythm. That was gone forever, replaced by something both more fragile and more precious. They were learning to be a family again, navigating the aftermath of trauma while celebrating the miracle of Laura's survival. The story had made national news. Woman rescued. After 11 months in captivity, husband search led by family dog ran the headlines. Interview requests poured in, but they declined them all. This wasn't a story for public consumption. This was their private hell and their private salvation. Harold Finch's financial empire crumbled spectacularly. The FBI investigation revealed he'd stolen over $14 million from more than 60 clients, most of them elderly retirees. The scheme had been running for nearly a decade, with Kyle Brennan helping him cover tracks and intimidate anyone who got suspicious. Laura had been the first person to compile enough evidence to expose him completely. Veronica Steele stopped by regularly, ostensibly to check on Laura's recovery, but really, Joel suspected, because she'd become invested in their family. She'd risked her own safety to help them, and that created a bond not easily broken. The FBI wants to hire me as a consultant on the case, Veronica mentioned one afternoon while sharing coffee with Laura in the kitchen. They're impressed with the investigation work you did. Said it's some of the most thorough documentation they've seen from a civilian. Laura smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm glad something good came from it. But honestly, Veronica, I never want to investigate anything again. I just want a quiet, boring life where the most exciting thing that happens is deciding what to make for dinner. That's fair, Veronica said. Though I should mention, some of Finch's victims want to thank you personally. They're organizing a gathering next month. You don't have to attend, but I thought you should know. Laura considered this. Maybe I should go. Maybe I need to see that it meant something, that those months in the dark accomplished something beyond just surviving. Joel, listening from the doorway, felt a surge of pride. His wife had endured hell, but was still thinking about others, still wanting to find meaning in her suffering. The preliminary hearing for Finch and Kyle Brennan was scheduled for early December. The prosecution had offered both men plea deals in exchange for full cooperation, but Finch had refused, insisting he'd done nothing wrong, that Laura had fabricated evidence. Kyle, more pragmatic, had taken the deal. Finch's lawyer is going to try to discredit you, Detective Pemberton warned during a prep session at the house. They'll claim you fabricated documents, that your time in witness protection makes you unreliable, that you have a history of deception. Let them try, Laura said, her voice steady. I have documentation, photographs, timestamps. I have testimony from clients who will confirm discrepancies in their accounts. I have Kyle's confession. The truth is on my side. But Joel could see the strain in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. Facing Finch again, even in a courtroom, was going to cost her. Preston had indeed transferred to a college closer to home and was taking online classes for the semester. He spent his days helping around the house, running errands, and having long conversations with his mother about everything they'd missed during her captivity. One evening, Joel found them in Laura's small office, going through the wedding photo album where Joel had found the storage unit key. I can't believe you hid clues in our family memories, Preston was saying, flipping through the pages. That's actually kind of brilliant, Mum. I knew your father would eventually look through these photos, Laura explained. We always did on our anniversary. I was counting on him being sentimental enough to go through them even after I was gone. I almost didn't, Joel admitted, joining them. I avoided this room for months. Couldn't bear to see your things, to remember what we'd lost. Laura reached for his hand. But you did eventually. That's what matters. They continued through the album, and Laura pointed out other small clues she'd left behind. A certain photograph positioned intentionally, a note written on the back of an image. Nothing obvious, but breadcrumbs she'd hoped would lead Joel to the truth. You were protecting us even while being held captive, Preston said, his voice thick with emotion. Planning your rescue while trying to keep Dad and me safe. Being a mother doesn't stop just because you're locked in a basement, Laura said simply. Every day, I thought about you both. Every decision I made was about keeping you safe and giving you a chance to find me. Gwen Paulson continued her role as unofficial family guardian, bringing meals and offering the kind of practical support that came from years of life experience. She never pried, never asked invasive questions, just provided steady, grandmotherly presence. I've been thinking, Gwen said one afternoon while helping Joel with yard work, about that black sedan I saw. I should have done more. Should have written down the license plate, called the police, something. You told me about it when it mattered, Joel assured her. That information helped confirm Kyle was involved. You helped save Laura, Gwen. The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. I'm just glad she's home. This neighborhood wasn't the same without her. Kyle Brennan's house 3 doors down sat empty now, a for sale sign planted in the front yard. Some neighbors wanted to forget he'd ever lived among them. Others couldn't stop talking about how a criminal had been hiding in plain sight, how he'd smiled and waved while holding a woman captive less than an hour away. Joel tried not to think about it too much, about the times Kyle had stopped to chat, had asked how Joel was coping with Laura's disappearance, had brought over a casserole with false sympathy. The deception was almost harder to process than the crime itself. The nightmares continued for Laura, though they became less frequent. She worked with her therapist twice a week, processing the trauma, learning coping mechanisms. Some nights were better than others. Some nights, Joel would wake to find her sitting by the window, staring out at the backyard, at the spot where Max had found the bracelet. I dream about the basement, she told him one night. Not just the bad parts. Sometimes I dream I'm still there. And this, you, Preston, home, this is the fantasy I created to cope. Then I wake up and have to convince myself it's real, that I really did get out. Joel held her close. You're home. This is real. I'm real. I know. Logically, I know. But trauma doesn't care about logic. Max, sensing Laura's distress, padded over and rested his head on her lap. She stroked his fur, finding comfort in the dog's solid presence. The therapist says it will get easier, Laura continued. That eventually, the good days will outnumber the bad ones. I'm holding on to that. We all are, Joel said, and we'll be here for every single day, good and bad. As November turned toward December, as the preliminary hearing approached, the family drew closer together. They'd survived the unthinkable. Now they had to learn to live again, to build a future from the ashes of the past. It wouldn't be easy, but they would do it together, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And that, Joel was learning, was all anyone could really ask for. The chance to heal, the chance to rebuild, and the presence of people who loved you through it all. 3 months had passed since the rescue. Winter had settled over Millbrook Heights, covering everything in a blanket of clean white snow that somehow made the world feel new again. Laura stood at the kitchen window, watching Preston and Joel build a snowman in the backyard, something they hadn't done since Preston was a child. The preliminary hearing had gone exactly as Detective Pemberton predicted. Harold Finch's lawyer had tried to discredit Laura, had questioned her credibility, had painted her as a woman with a history of deception. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documents, the testimony of victims, Kyle Brennan's confession, the physical evidence from the farmhouse. It all painted an undeniable picture. Finch had been denied bail and was awaiting trial. His assets had been seized, his reputation destroyed. The trial itself was scheduled for March, and while Laura would have to testify again, she felt ready now. Stronger. The man who'd held her captive for 11 months no longer had power over her. The clients Finch had stolen from, 63 people whose retirement savings had been plundered, were receiving restitution. Not everything they'd lost, but enough to make a difference. Several had reached out to Laura personally, thanking her for her courage, for refusing to stay silent, even when it cost her everything. That gathering Veronica mentioned had happened 2 weeks ago. Laura had been nervous about attending, worried about facing the people whose lives had been disrupted by her investigation. But instead of blame, she'd found gratitude. An elderly woman named Dorothy held Laura's hands and cried, thanking her for recovering enough money that she wouldn't lose her home. A retired veteran named Frank told her she was a hero. Laura hadn't felt like a hero, just a woman who'd done what needed to be done. But their words had helped heal something inside her. Preston had officially transferred schools and was thriving closer to home. He'd even started dating someone, a kind young woman named Claire, who understood, without judgment, what his family had been through. Laura liked her immediately, appreciated the way Claire never pried, but always listened when Preston needed to talk. Joel had returned to full-time work, though he'd rearranged his office so he could see Laura in the living room while he worked. Little things like that, maintaining visual contact, regular check-ins, helped both of them feel secure. The separation anxiety would ease eventually, the therapist assured them. For now, they simply honored what they needed. Max had become something of a local celebrity. The story of the dog who wouldn't stop barking until his owner investigated had captured people's imagination. A journalist had even asked to interview them about it, promising to donate the proceeds to an animal rescue charity. Laura and Joel had agreed, figuring some good should come from their story. Gwen Paulson had become even more integrated into their family. She joined them for dinner twice a week, and Laura had started teaching her to use a smartphone so they could text. The older woman's steady presence had been a blessing through the darkest times. Veronica still checked in regularly, though her visits were more social now than professional. She'd been hired by the FBI as a consultant and was helping prosecute several related financial fraud cases that had emerged from the Finch investigation. Her work with Laura had reinvigorated her sense of purpose, she'd admitted. Retirement had been boring. The house felt different now, not haunted by absence anymore, but filled with presence, with life being actively lived rather than passively endured. Laura had started cooking again, had begun tending to her neglected garden, planning what she'd plant in the spring. Small acts of reclaiming normalcy. She'd also made peace with her past. Catherine Whitmore and Laura Carter weren't separate people. They were both her, both parts of a life that had been complicated and difficult, but ultimately meaningful. She'd testified against criminals twice now, at great personal cost both times. That meant something. That mattered. Joel came inside, stamping snow from his boots, his cheeks red from cold. Preston wants to know if you'll come out and help with the snowman. Says it needs your artistic touch. Laura smiled, pulling on her coat and boots. 3 months ago, she couldn't imagine feeling joy again. Now, here it was. Simple, ordinary joy in building a snowman with her family. Outside, Preston was rolling an enormous snowball for the base. "Mum, perfect timing. We need someone to make the face. Dad's artistically challenged." "I heard that," Joel called out, laughing. They worked together in the cold afternoon light, building something silly and temporary, but utterly perfect. Max bounded through the snow around them, barking happily, occasionally trying to eat the snowballs they rolled. When the snowman was complete, with a carrot nose and button eyes and a scarf from the hall closet, they stood back to admire their work. "We should take a picture," Preston suggested. They posed together, the three of them, with Max sitting proudly in front. Joel set the camera timer and rushed to join them. As the shutter clicked, capturing this moment, Laura felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain. She still had nightmares, still had hard days when the basement felt closer than this snowy yard. But peace nonetheless. The peace of knowing she'd survived. The peace of being surrounded by people who loved her. The peace of understanding that terrible things could happen, and you could still find your way back to joy. That evening, they gathered in the living room. Joel built a fire. Preston made hot chocolate with Laura's recipe, and they sat together watching the flames dance. Max dozed at Laura's feet, twitching occasionally in doggy dreams. "I've been thinking," Laura said quietly, "about writing a book. Not for publicity or money, but for other people who've survived trauma. To let them know it's possible to come back from the dark." Joel reached for her hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea." "Me too," Preston agreed. "Your story could help a lot of people, Mum." Laura nodded, feeling the rightness of it. She'd been given her life back. Now she wanted to use it to help others find their way home, too. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the backyard where this had all begun. Covering the spot where Max had found the bracelet, where the first clue had been unearthed, where the journey toward truth had started. Some mysteries are solved, some wounds heal, and some families prove unbreakable no matter what tries to tear them apart. The Carters had survived the worst. Everything else was just living, and that, they'd discovered, was more than enough.